We couldn't save our 15-year marriage because my wife friend-zoned me and wants a platonic companionship. My wife, 35F, and I, 35M, have been married for 15 years and together for 20 years. We have two kids, 12 and 14, whom we absolutely adore and work tirelessly to provide the best possible life for. For the past 3 years, things have been somewhat bumpy. I understand that our kids are at an age where they require a ton of attention and resources with school, band, club, sports, and other extracurriculars. I'm aware of the physical and emotional toll they can have on marriages. However, for these past 3 years, my wife and I have had very little intimacy and very little sex, and we've been trying very hard to work on that aspect of our relationship. This past year has been the most difficult and by far the darkest year in our marriage. We didn't talk very much. We essentially became roommates, co-parenting our kids under the same roof. It was very depressing and demoralizing. It got to the point where we began contemplating divorce, and it became very dark and gloomy in the household. Because of this, we began seeking help with both individual therapy and couples therapy. It seems to have helped a little. Little by little, we started to get along and began having deeper conversations about what our marriage looks like and what we would love for it to look like. This is where it gets tough. As time passed, my wife started to tell me she no longer felt in love with me and that she only saw me as a best friend. She said she only loved me in a very platonic way. This was one of the main reasons she didn't have any desire for intimacy, let alone sex. This was very shocking to me, and frankly, I was devastated. I became angry and depressed, and I couldn't fathom the thought that I was no longer wanted or desired by the person I was completely in love with. Things began to deteriorate again, and not long after, we were back to square one. I sat down with her one afternoon and had a heart-to-heart conversation, asking questions about where the root of this problem lies. Her answer was, I don't know, and that she had built up resentment towards me, but didn't know where it stemmed from. As you can imagine, this provided very little insight into how to approach this. I'm puzzled, frustrated, and I don't know what to do at this point. Currently, we've arrived at a place where she says that she has no sex drive, no desire for intimacy or connection. She says that all she wants is simply companionship, which basically means our co-parenting roommate dynamic. I asked her what I could possibly do, or what is it about me that is so unattractive or undesirable, and her response is always, I don't know. She stated that she does love me, but it's not the same. She's been feeling disconnected for years and says that our marriage just takes up too much work. Her focus is only on the children for now, and she says that my co-parenting contributions are meaningful to her. I'm at a loss, and I'm mainly venting about my frustration. It's tough to realize that the person you love has no feelings for you. I feel like, at this point, I'm only here to contribute financially and as a parent. I feel like what she means by as companionship is that she's comfortable with the convenience of having a good father for our kids and my financial contribution to the household. As for intimacy and sex, she basically told me that it's not something she's interested in or wants at this time. She mentioned that the only way to get to that point would be to be intoxicated, which is incredibly awful and very wrong. I told her I don't think forcing herself to have sex or be intimate while drinking or smoking is good, and I declined to be a part of that. To my surprise, it upset her and made her more distant. We've both been extremely honest and transparent. We've never cheated on each other, and we are always free to look through each other's phones, emails, socials, etc., though we hardly ever do. I asked her if there was someone else, and she denied it. Honestly, I believe her. We then peacefully went through each other's things, and as expected, it was clean. We've always been very forward with each other, even with the hard topics, so I don't sense or smell any foul play or infidelity. Am I wrong for declining to be intimate or have sex only when she's intoxicated? I'm firm on my stance of not partaking in any intimacy only when I'm high or drunk because it just doesn't sit well with me. I don't know how to help our situation, and I'm starting to feel anxious and desperate. We're both fairly young and healthy individuals with good careers and are good parents. I'm just not sure how our lives could have driven us to this point. I'd love some outside perspective on this matter and some insight on how to address something like this. It feels so awful to be unwanted and undesired by my own spouse. I hate it. My wife of 15 plus years is no longer in love with me and doesn't know why. She now says she can only have sex while intoxicated or I need to settle for a platonic, sexless marriage. She doesn't know why that is, but it is what it is, and I'm in need of insight or advice. Some commenters have mentioned our past involvement in swinging. We did some swinging in the past, which was fun for a while. We mutually decided to stop doing it, and we have established that this isn't the case now. Our marriage seemed to be in a good place back then. This is something we disclosed with our couples therapist to make sure we weren't neglecting an obvious potential issue. I did ask my wife if our swinging experience was affecting her view on our relationship, and she said it wasn't. Our experience with swinging was always together and very sex-driven, with no real emotional attachment or polyamory. I have to believe her on this. I have no reason to distrust her. To date, she's always been very forward and never afraid of dealing with things head-on, no matter how painful. If this issue is a consequence of swinging, it existed long before we entered the lifestyle. I agree that swinging wasn't a solution. It never was meant to be. It was more about exploring if it affected how we felt about each other. If we had concluded that I was the problem and she had no issue with other men, we would have parted ways amicably. However, this wasn't the case. She didn't like sex or intimacy even there. She was very much in control of the whole situation. Yes, I went along with it, but it felt very organic, and it was her decision to explore this aspect of our relationship. If you will, it was her effort to discover more, to learn more. In terms of our current issue, I saw it as a way of understanding whether I might be the problem, and I was ready to accept that if it turned out to be the case. It turns out that wasn't the case. 6 years of challenges sounds awful. I'd very much hate for that to have been the result. If this started after we stopped exploring the lifestyle, it would be concerning. A comment on our experience. You're absolutely right in pointing out that any past experiences, including those with swinging, can change things, sometimes in ways that affect relationships deeply. For example, the best thing that came out of that experience, above all else, was the level of transparency and communication it required. We had deep, honest conversations, and it helped us build a strong foundation of communication that we now apply to all aspects of our lives, including parenting. My wife even agrees that we're grateful for that takeaway. Honestly, I can't stress enough that while we did explore this lifestyle, it was a positive experience for us. We mutually decided to stop because it no longer felt necessary, and we enjoyed the friendships we built. The decision to stop wasn't based on negative experiences, but on a natural shift in what we wanted for our marriage. It wasn't about any dissatisfaction with our relationship. We both agreed that it wasn't fulfilling us in the way we'd hoped. That said, I know swinging can cause issues for many people, but for us, it was part of our approach to solving an issue we were already dealing with long before we explored it. It was a practical attempt at addressing what we were going through at the time. Update: therapy session with my wife. I want to update everyone on how things went in our latest therapy session. I'm not sure if this is helpful to anyone, but I took many of the responses, suggestions, and comments from my initial post and put together a list of things I wanted to discuss with our couples therapist to help us address some of the core issues we're facing. One of the main topics that came up, which has been a recurring theme, was resentment. This issue has really been eating at me, especially since my wife keeps telling me she doesn't know why she's feeling this way, or how it's affecting her emotionally and mentally. I brought this up with our therapist again, and reopened the conversation about the long history we have together, being married for 15 years, and having been together since we were 14 years old. We got married young, had children early, and experienced significant hardships, including severe financial difficulties and a lack of a social life for many years because we were busy raising our children. My wife was 19, and I was 20 when we had our first child. The therapist then guided my wife to reflect on her own feelings, separate from the role of being a mother, and to look at things from a more personal perspective. She admitted that she felt frustrated by all the things she had missed out on in life, but clarified that she didn't regret having our kids or think she missed out on dating or relationships. Instead, she felt like she lost a lot of her personal friendships. This was a big realization because a major source of tension between us has been how isolated we've been in our lives due to raising our children. I reminded her how important it is to have good friends and to make time for herself and her relationships. We've had multiple conversations over the past few years about how critical it is to have a strong support system of friends who can relate to our experiences, help us navigate life, or just provide a little fun and relaxation. The main reason my wife has avoided putting effort into friendships or self-care, however, has always been because she was so focused on our children. I started to see that much of her frustrations seemed to stem from the pressures of raising our kids and losing touch with the personal side of her life. At this point, I asked her directly if part of her frustration was due to the fact that we became parents so young and if she felt upset with me for that. She acknowledged that it was a difficult time, but also said she didn't blame me and recognized that it was a shared responsibility. Progress and next steps. We agreed that we need to put more effort into nurturing friendships, both together and individually. Toward the end of the session, we discussed actionable steps to improve our situation. I had already decided that if she continued to express that she saw me more as a co-parenting partner than a romantic partner, I would need to take a step back and reevaluate things for my own well-being. Unfortunately, by the end of the session, we were still somewhat at an impasse. She reiterated that she doesn't feel ready for intimacy and is struggling to be emotionally present in that way. However, she still expressed that she loves me immensely, just that she doesn't have the same feelings of desire right now. She said she felt guilty for not being there for me in the way I need. I also brought up the past briefly, just to confirm that our exploration of swinging wasn't the issue. We've discussed this many times, and both of us agreed that it wasn't a negative experience. It was an attempt to explore solutions to a problem that already existed before we tried it. We've long since moved on from that phase in our relationship. Where do we go from here? I was very direct in saying that I can't continue in this co-parenting roommate dynamic. I've done everything I can, and I feel that the situation has reached a point where it's no longer about what I'm doing or not doing. It's about us being able to reconnect and address our needs as a couple. I need to be with someone who is actively engaged in our relationship, someone who is committed to resolving these issues and working toward an active, intimate, and sexual partnership. I expressed how I'm not willing to remain in a situation where I feel like a convenience, and that there's more to life than being mere roommates and co-parents. I made sure she knows I love her dearly, and that I do want this marriage to work, but it requires effort from both of us. I also told her that I am fully committed to this marriage, as long as she is too. However, if she's not, that's okay, but I can't continue in a relationship where my efforts are not reciprocated. I told her I have no plans of leaving, and I don't want a divorce, but I made it clear that if things don't change, divorce may be the only option. Of course, emotions ran high, and it was a very difficult conversation. In the end, I walked away feeling discouraged but determined to implement the 180 method we discussed. It's tough, and it's been difficult to stay emotionally distant, especially because I love her and wish I could be close to her. But I understand that part of the process involves giving her space to recognize the situation for what it is, and allowing her the chance to reflect on what she truly wants. So, I began putting the 180 method into practice right away. I told her things would be different moving forward, and that I would honor the co-parenting arrangement without complaint. However, it's clear to me that I'm not happy with this, and I'm not okay with it, even if I'm not actively working to fix things. I told her that if she wasn't going to make the effort, I couldn't continue doing all the work myself. I've decided that I'm no longer going to prioritize the relationship in the same way unless there's an active effort from both sides. For the next few days, I kept to my word, being more emotionally distant and focusing on myself. I didn't respond to her requests for help in the same way I used to, which took her by surprise. She seemed upset, calling me cold and distant, but I told her that I'm simply taking care of myself, just as she is. I'm no longer going to be the one to make all the effort. She didn't take it well. A few days in, she was visibly upset and stressed. She even cried, telling me she felt something was wrong because I was being distant. I explained to her that this is the dynamic she proposed, and it's the one I'm now following. It's been painful because I still care about her deeply, but I know this space might be what's necessary to help both of us see the relationship more clearly. After about a week of this shift, things started to change. I noticed her starting to reach out to me more and trying to engage in conversation. I also noticed her making more time for herself outside of being a mom, which is huge because she's neglected her own well-being for years. I've been encouraged by these small signs, and I'm hopeful that as we both focus on personal growth, the marriage can improve. However, I can't predict where this will go, and I'm trying to remain realistic about it. We're still going to continue therapy, and no matter what happens, I believe that seeking professional help has been invaluable. We've both set clear boundaries and expectations, and I feel more at peace knowing we're both being honest with each other, even if it's difficult. I will always love my wife, but I can't continue in a relationship where intimacy is lacking and where we are just co-parents sharing a home. Thanks to everyone who offered support and advice. This will be my final update on the situation, but I really appreciate all the kind words and feedback. I wish you all the best. TLDR, my wife and I have been struggling with a relationship where she's shifted to a more platonic co-parenting dynamic, and I've been using the 180 method to encourage her to reflect on our marriage. While it's been difficult, it seems to be helping her realize that I am more than just a roommate, and we're still working through it in therapy. Therapy is essential, and communication is key for any couple facing similar challenges. Additional comments and responses. Comment 1. I understand how complicated your situation is, and I do think there are many factors at play here. I agree that the financial aspects should be handled carefully, and it's important to communicate clearly about expectations without making the other person feel manipulated. Comment 2. This is a tough situation, and I'm curious how the finances will work if you're splitting everything 50-50ths. How are you handling it if you share accounts? Updated post. It will definitely feel more real from here on. To clarify for those commenting, yes, my wife will have slightly less leftover money after responsibilities, but it's still enough to live on. For example, if I make $3,000 a month and she makes $1,000 and our shared responsibilities amount to $1,000, she'd contribute $500 and I would contribute the other $500. Before, she was contributing only $250. This is my last comment on finances, but rest assured, she's fine and she's not struggling. When asked, what if she leaves for another person's? Interestingly, she's had no shortage of attention from men, and neither of us is a jealous person, so I've witnessed it firsthand. She's usually indifferent to it. If another person was the answer, she would tell me, or I would sense it. I believe the issue goes deeper than just superficial attention from other people. If it turns out this is the issue, so be it. But I'd find peace knowing that I left no stone unturned. I'd be disappointed and saddened if she left for someone who accepted the bare minimum, but at least I'd know it's not all my fault. I know I have my own part in the situation. That's just marriage. I expect sadness and even depression to creep in, but I believe we'll both overcome it. If it comes to that, I will have clarity on the reasons. Also, I know she wouldn't cheat. We're both very blunt and transparent with each other. We've always been upfront about any issues, and we owe it to ourselves to keep it that way. New update. I debated for a long time about whether to post another update, but a few significant changes have occurred, and I felt it was important to share, not only to inform others, but also to process things in a more structured way. We're almost 9 weeks into the 180 approach, and I've seen some positive changes in my wife's behavior. As I mentioned earlier, she began noticing the things she had taken for granted and started asking more about my whereabouts. She also noticed that I was spending more time with the kids without her, and surprisingly, she started to invite herself along, which I didn't decline. A lot has changed, and it seems to be for the better. This past Memorial Day weekend, she asked me if I wanted to grab coffee because she wanted to talk to me about something. This was huge. I can't recall the last time she asked to talk to me about something important. I was nervous about what this could be, but I agreed, and we spent time away from the kids at a local coffee shop. The conversation was incredibly constructive. She opened up about her feelings and thoughts, which gave me a better understanding of where she is emotionally and mentally. We summarized the core issues in our relationship, and she actually asked me for help, which was a huge step. For the past 2+ years, I had felt her absence, but this time felt different. She was sincere, and I was genuinely excited to hear her speak so openly. After listening to her thoughts, I proposed a plan that I had been thinking about for a while. I was planning to bring this up in a few months if things hadn't improved, but the conversation felt like the right moment to share it. I started by acknowledging her feelings and validating her concerns. I told her that I care about her well-being and that I never want to see her sad or struggling. I reassured her that my goal, as always, is for us to reconcile and return to the happily ever after we promised each other. I also expressed that my love for her is just as strong, if not stronger, than it was when we first got married. I continued by sharing my perspective on the situation. You can read my previous post for details and how her rejection and neglect had impacted me emotionally. I told her that the way I've been acting lately, distant and transactional, wasn't personal but a way for me to protect myself. I cannot control her actions, only my own. This led into the heart of the conversation: self-accountability. I explained that for a long time I had focused all my energy on trying to make her happy by doing things I knew she liked or wanted. Unfortunately, those efforts were often met with rejection, leaving me stressed and emotionally drained. I realized that I needed to make a change for myself. I've started working on new habits and routines to improve myself and better my mental health, all while fulfilling my responsibilities as a husband, father, and co-parent. My goal is to continue to grow both personally and as a partner, to be the best husband I can be, and to work towards a healthier, happier life for all of us. She seemed very receptive to everything I said. She told me that she's noticed the changes I've been making and expressed that she's proud of the improvements she's seen in me. This update felt like a good place to leave things for now. While the journey ahead is still uncertain, I believe we've taken a positive step forward. Our conversations are becoming more honest, and I'm hopeful that this approach will lead to lasting change. We're still committed to therapy, and I truly believe that it's been an invaluable resource in helping us navigate this difficult time. Whatever the outcome, I'll know that I gave it my all. Thank you for all your support, advice, and kind words. This will likely be my last update on this topic, but I'll always wish you all the best. TLDR. I started the 180 method after my wife, and I reached a low point. This approach has led to positive changes on her end, and we're starting to have more constructive conversations. Therapy has been key in helping us navigate the situation. No matter what happens, I'm committed to working on myself and improving our relationship. Relevant comments. Comment 1. I'm curious about how you're splitting responsibilities. Is everything 50-50 between you two? It sounds like a fair system, but is there a potential for imbalance if your finances are tied together? Response: yes, we both work and share the financial responsibilities. The 50-50 split is not meant to hurt her financially, but rather to demonstrate the imbalance in the dynamic. This is more about setting boundaries and clarifying roles. She's not struggling, and everything is still manageable, but this system helps me communicate the change in our relationship. Comment 2. I've been in a similar situation with my partner. How do you manage the finances when you share everything in a joint account? Response: great question. We used to share everything in a joint account. Now we've separated the bills and have each taken responsibility for certain expenses. The remaining money will go into separate accounts. The key here is the transparency. It's about showing the shift in our relationship dynamics. Updated post. She also told me that she's starting to realize she's been feeling left behind. She acknowledged that some of the things affecting her negatively are things she could have handled differently. Toward the end of our conversation, which lasted about 3 hours, the mood shifted towards reconciliation. I told her that I still wanted us to work things out, but I made it clear that I wasn't going to continue living under the current circumstances. I expressed that while I wanted her to be happy, even if that meant finding happiness elsewhere, I also deserved to be happy. I also shared that I didn't want our children growing up thinking that this type of relationship dynamic was normal because they deserve better. She agreed, and I could sense her willingness to make things better, too. When she told me she didn't know what to do, I suggested that we start by setting some clear, personal goals. These goals would be about our own individual growth, not about making the other person happy. We agreed on the following principles. Ownership of happiness. We are each responsible for our own happiness. Neither of us should be solely responsible for making the other happy, and both of us need to find what that personal plan looks like. Communication is key. We agreed that communication is essential. If something is bothering us or needs to be addressed, we have to talk about it openly. We also agreed that unsolicited advice or help wouldn't be given unless specifically asked for. This way, we can avoid misunderstandings and frustration. Make a list of needs and wants. To avoid confusion, we made lists of what we each need and want from the relationship. This isn't a checklist for accountability or a way to keep score. It's a tool to guide us toward understanding each other better. It's up to each person whether they choose to meet those needs, but we won't use the list as a weapon for arguments. Accountability for our choices. We agreed that if we are not happy at the end of this journey, we would each take responsibility for it. If one of our needs wasn't met, we would ask ourselves if we did everything to address the issue. If we did, we can move forward with a clear conscience, knowing we did all we could. If not, it would mean that either we didn't prioritize the issue enough, or we didn't care enough to meet the need. The goal is personal growth. Ultimately, the goal is that we both focus on growing as individuals. When we improve ourselves, it naturally improves our relationship. The actions we take to meet each other's needs should come from a place of love and care, not out of obligation. It should be because we genuinely want to see the other person happy. We set a hard deadline for Memorial Day 2025. At that time, we will evaluate how we've grown and whether we're both happy in the relationship. If we determine we aren't happy, we will part ways. We agreed that we will each take full responsibility for what led to that decision, whether it's due to unmet needs or a lack of effort on our parts. Where things stand now. Since that conversation, a lot has changed. We've both started focusing on personal growth. She's been very committed to therapy and mental health. She's also started taking medication for depression, which seems to be helping a lot. I've noticed her confidence growing, and her mood has been more positive overall. We've been working on our intimacy in different ways, including physical touch and words of affirmation. And yes, sex, which had become awkward due to the distance we created, has started to make a reappearance, which is exciting for both of us. We've also started working out together, and we've both lost some weight, which has been a great boost to our well-being. Communication has greatly improved, and we're both feeling more connected. I'm excited to see where all of this leads, but I also know that we're taking things one day at a time. We've both agreed that we will continue working on ourselves, as well as on each other's needs. The main thing is that we're now working together as a team. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who has supported me through this journey. Your feedback has given me hope and insight, and it's been incredibly helpful emotionally and mentally. I'm going to stop posting updates for now, but I'll provide one more update around Memorial Day 2025, when we plan to evaluate where we stand. TLDR, after following the 180 method, my wife and I have started working on our personal growth and improving our relationship. We've set a deadline for Memorial Day 2025 to decide if we'll stay together or separate. We're taking things one step at a time, but it's already looking like we're on a better path. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit notification bell to stay updated.